some fun stuff that happens with live. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Today I'm very excited to have Scott Moe join us for education.
I appreciate it.
And so today we're going to talk a lot about education. I'm going to do a quick little bio. But first, my name, Adam Hicks, and I'm a school board trustee in Regina here. And a quick little disclaimer, the views expressed in here are those of my own, not those of our school board. So I have some bio, or some research I've done, I guess. And the first piece
I'd maybe just add that the views that I express here as well would be the views of Adam, and then not the views of
So we're going to set some policy today, is what he's saying. That's Thanks, Scott. A good way to start. I have heard that you are surrounded by teachers and educators at every family function you attend.
Yeah, absolutely. I am. My mom is a teacher. She's trying to retire, newly retired. My sister's a teacher. My sister-in-law teaches in a French immersion school, as well as my late mother-in-law was a teacher. My other sister-in-law is also a teacher. So I have some great input sources with respect to, in particular, the elementary ages of educators.
That's good. So we have a lot of teachers that influence future premier. Some other things. Scott grew up near Shellbrook, and you've been to the U of S, a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture. You've owned a few businesses, I saw in your bio. You've been extremely active in your community. Too many things to even list on here. So Economic Development Corp, other committees, you've coached teams and been involved in softball and hockey. And
that's right.
Holy cow, the list goes on and on.
That's what children do to you.
Yeah, fair enough. Mine are still young, so I'm getting into those.
It's coming.
Yeah.
They take all of your time and all of your money, and it's worth every second of it.
True enough. It's important to cherish those moments. And then for an MLA, you actually were elected back in 2011 in the Ross Stern Shellbrook area, and you've been the Ministry of Advanced Ed, as well as the Minister of Environment too.
That's right.
Which gives you some good experience.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So what we want to do is we're going to start with what we're calling a softball question. So
Great.
My son has ran out of a few questions here, and oh, I lied. I skipped a part.
Oh.
I forgot that I did other research as well.
Oh,
so
okay.
Thanks to my spouse in the background that reminded me. What I found is I went through all of your Facebook posts and Twitter posts, and there was something common that kept coming up that I want to feature. So Anna's going to switch the screen here.
November 22nd,
and a common
has been
theme
sent about engaging people and partisan politics or endorsing a particular candidate. It's about making sure that you have choose the candidate that you feel
so now it'll be coming up.
Is best
Thanks
for
our
education.
And by the way, keep the comments coming. We're going to try to get to as many comments. Scott said he's here till next morning, so we're going to cover about 6 hours of questions.
We're going to do an all-nighter.
No, but for real, keep those comments coming. We're going to try to get to a number of them right away. Hit the like button and share this so we can get more people involved in it. So let's see what I found on Facebook here. So what you're going to see on the screen that I found are numerous MLAs. So there are, you can see them, they've been coming up. I've been seeing them pop up on your Facebook page, and MLA after MLA after MLA. And Mohammed Fiaz is one that just popped up there. He's my representative from where I live in the city, and there's the final picture with the MLAs. And what I wanted to say is, with that research, that seems impressive, and that's a lot of support from your fellow co-workers, I guess.
Yeah, it is, and I'm honored to have it. And I can honestly say we do have a great team in this leadership race. They're part of putting our policy platforms together. They're part of the work we do. It isn't lost on me in a race such as this for leader of the party and ultimately premier of the province. It is my name that is on the ballot. It's me that goes to the microphone when we make an announcement, whatever that may be. But I wouldn't be there without them. They're a great team of colleagues that I have, and I am truly honored to work on this campaign with them.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's when I was looking through the post. It's pretty neat. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's exciting, and there's no other word than to say that I'm so honored to work alongside them in this effort.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. So now we have, so this question.
Now come the tough ones.
It's going to be a tough one. So this one comes from my 7-year-old Corbin.
Those are the hardest.
It's this one's a little different. So.
Hi, my name is Corbin Hicks. I'm in grade 2, and I go to Massey School. My question is, can I go fill up my water bottle?
So Corbin's question was, can he go fill up his water bottle? And that is a very random question.
Yeah.
Corbin was running out of questions to ask.
Yeah. No, you know, the questions from our youth as we travel the province are the hardest, but this one maybe not quite as hard. But yeah, absolutely, Corbin, you can fill up your water bottle. You can fill it up at the fountain in your school. You can fill it up out of the tap at your home, and it's actually a good way to limit the water bottles that are in use in our communities, of which I dealt with some of the recycling programs that we had as Minister of Environment. So it actually is a little more relevant than we even think in being a good environmental steward and reusing your water bottle at school, at home, in your daily life. So fill your boots, Corbin, and fill your water bottle while you're at it.
Okay, thanks, Scott. So we want to get into some of the more serious questions,
Absolutely.
and we're gonna get into some comments from. Looks like there's a lot of comments coming in, which is great. So keep them rolling. But our first prepared question comes from Ali, and Ali is an education student at the University of Regina. And let's see what Ali has to ask.
And I'm just wondering what your vision for the K-12 education is here in Saskatchewan.
Thanks, Ali.
Well, thank you very much, Ali, for the question, and it's an important question. I think for all candidates on all sides, from all parties in this leadership race, as they vie to be the leader of their party, and in our case, the Premier of Saskatchewan. Our K-12 education system, I think it has been quite strong over the last number of decades, and I say that again, irrespective of government. It's something that has been important to society here in the province of Saskatchewan, important to parents, and ultimately important to parents because it's their children, the next generation that is attending. As we move forward, I see things changing. Again, from some of the input that I've had from people close to me, family and friends that are educators, is some of the supports that we have in the classroom. So as we move forward, and I hear about a higher number of children that have higher needs, in particular in the primary grades. And if I could take a couple minutes to share a couple of stories I've had from a number of different people. And the first group of individuals that I talked to, and there's a number of them, but I'll single two out, talk to me about how there are a larger number of higher needs students in those primary grades, and how they are spending an increasing amount of time with some of those students that have those higher needs, and are concerned that they aren't giving them the education and care that they require and are entitled to. And then in doing so, the other portion of the class that would be classified as not having those higher needs, they're concerned that they're not having the time to also spend with those children.
That attention. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I've heard this from educators in the elementary grades. I've also heard it from teachers in the high school as well. And I found it interesting as I asked those teachers, how do we start to address this? And it was the high school teachers that really drove this home for me, to say that we need additional supports in the classroom in the elementary grades. We have children that sometimes will enter grade 10 that don't have anywhere near that reading level or skill level, and if we were able to provide those supports in those elementary grades, they would be nearer to that grade 10 level when they get there. And so that this isn't lost on me as we move forward with education in the province of Saskatchewan. And we have invested heavily in our supports for learning in our classrooms in Saskatchewan, and I think that's something that we need to continue to do as we go forward through the next number of years, not just the next year, but the next number of years.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. I appreciate, especially starting with the vision, that you start with some of those challenges, and that is, I know our school board and others face those challenges,
Right.
and you hit it on it. It's taking that attention out of the classroom. So,
and the challenges change, over time. We've had challenges of classroom sizes and things in some of our urban centers over the last number of years, attempting to address those. But they do change over time, and we need to be, have our ears open, if you will, to address them as they arise.
no, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have our first question from the audience we're going to take here. It's Trina. So Trina, thank you for your comments, and keep them coming. Put them down below here. Trina says, how will you ensure that rural schools have the supports they need for students with special needs or who have English as a second language, so kind of along the same lines.
Right, and again, we discussed a little bit about the supports for learning in the classroom, and in particular in those elementary schools. The same holds true for rural schools, and the English as a second language is a topic that I get the opportunity to talk about, and you wouldn't normally think this, as I represent a very rural constituency, but I get to talk about it most notably in the community roster, where there is a large number of students in that school, and we're going to build a new one there. I might add, as it's required. But a large number of students in that school and a number of other schools in the rural areas that I represent as an MLA. They do require these supports, and so as we move forward, I see this as one of the challenges that we have to address together with school boards, with our educators, on how is the best way to continue to provide the supports for learning that we have in those classrooms, whether it be English as an additional language that requires some extra time in the classroom, or whether it be some other needs that students have. I think this is the next challenge that we need to discuss with respect to educating our children to become who we are in our communities 20 years down the road.
Well, I appreciate that support. So just to clarify too for some of those viewers, right now how it works is the funding comes to the school boards. There's 28 school boards across this province, and they prioritize and fund specific areas. So what I appreciate is that support from the top government leaders, and that those funds might be there to support some of those areas. So thanks for the question, Trina. I really appreciate that.
Yes, thank you, Trina.
Okay, so we're going to I'm going to quickly butt in here for a second. So on Scott's website, there's actually more material, so I'm going to give it a quick little plug here. So standwithscott.ca. There's a bunch of policy discussions and things like that. So I'd recommend you take a quick look at that, and there's some more information on there. So our next prepared question comes from a chair of one of our school community councils. So I'm very glad that they're very engaged, and I'm excited. So Jill is the chair of one of our school community councils. Let's see what Jill has to say.
The population of Saskatchewan is different today than it was even a few years ago, and we'll continue to see it change in the years ahead. Demographically, what challenges do you anticipate for the K-12 education sector? What about economic challenges, and what opportunities do you see?
So thanks, Jill. So basically it comes down to what are some of the economic challenges in the K-12 sector with just the changes in our province, so with the growth, with the demographic changes. So what are some of those challenges you see, and what are some of those opportunities you see?
Well, the challenges are in some areas of our province geographically are just that, full classrooms, and we've worked hard, I think, as a government, and to try to address that with some of the new school builds that we have across the province. Some of them replacing existing schools, but some of them new builds to address the higher number of kids that we have in our province. This is a challenge, but it's also the result of opportunities that we've had economically in the province of Saskatchewan, and we need to continue to ensure that our funding keeps up, quite honestly, so that we can continue to offer the level of education and the level of services that Saskatchewan people expect when it comes to K-12 education. The opportunities as we move forward are great as well. You start to, we were just talking earlier, previous to coming on the air, about how the world has changed in the way of technology, for example, and no one is more technologically connected than our children, whether it be with the iPads and the iPhones that they have. And I look at my children now, 19 and 24.
They can teach us.
Oh my goodness! And my connection to technology was being able to program the VCR for my father, but my children are far beyond that and wouldn't know what a VCR is. I've dated myself now, but there's great opportunities in technologies to move forward. I think there's also great opportunities in involving our communities in our education, far beyond just outside of the school walls, but also inside. We have tremendously successful business people, career people in each of our communities across the province, and I think there's opportunities for us for them to either come into our classrooms or however that may be, to share the knowledge that they have, not only from a career perspective, but also from a community building perspective as well. As you know, we are educating our children in our schools, but we're also building our next generation of people for the province here. And you know, we're going to do everything that we can to give them the education that they have a right to, the high quality education. But I think it's not beyond us to want to keep as many of our smart young children here in the province as well, so our communities are strong into the future.
So I like your point on community and building and being connected to that community. So can you expand more on that? Because I think that's a real value in that the more connected I feel to our community, the more likely I'm going to contribute more and
yeah, well, what is the saying? It takes a village to raise a child, right? And I think that is true, and we should never forget that. And I not to give one of my colleagues a plug, but I think Tina Beaudry-Miller actually has some very innovative platform ideas around you know, some of the financial literacy and involving the community in bringing that into the classroom. I don't think anything should be off the table, and I know some teachers at an ad hoc basis or a one-off basis are doing just this in their community. And our schools, our children are part of the community each and every day, and I just think there's tremendous opportunities for us to bring not just business owners and businessmen into there, but career people as well. And I think about the opportunities, you know, in Estevan, for example, the industries that are there are different than they are where I live in Shelburne. We have a little more forestry industry up in our area, where they do a little bit of coal mining in Estevan, and there's all sorts of opportunities, you know, just to learn a little more about your community there too. So I you know, I think back of the epitome of community involvement that I saw in Shelburne, where I live, was a few years ago, where a number of teachers really went above and beyond, and they organized the provincial school community. It was called Catching Fire. It was modeled after the TV show that the kids watched there. And it was the SCC conference, I think is what it was. Cool. So we had 900 children in the community. 900 of them participated in a parade up and down Main Street. Theo Fleury was a guest speaker that came and spoke. It was just fabulous, and all put on by a lot of after-hours work and effort by educators in our school, and tremendous participation from students in our community, surrounding communities, and across the province.
And I see that Ministry of Education and school boards, that if we, not that we're not, like, there's so many awesome things doing it, but just to re-spark it and re-engage it, and it can expand a lot. So
exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's a good time. So, okay, we have another question from the audience. We're going to take Shar, and thanks, Shar, for being active. She's been really active on a lot of these, so thanks, Shar. Government released its education sector strategic plan in 2014. What will you do to ensure that its targets are met? And for those that don't know, can you maybe just explain a little bit about the strategic plan?
The strategic plan is you know, ultimately is you don't achieve what you can't measure, right? And some of the reading and some of our baselines on the targets for children to achieve throughout their years in there. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, the tracking is the graduating by a certain time is the ultimate tracking goal for our province.
On-time graduation.
On-time graduation is the term. That's correct. These are discussions actually. So I, as an MLA over the last number of years, I represent the areas of four different school divisions in my rural area.
I didn't know that.
One out of Prince Albert, one out of Warman, two out of North Battleford, and so we have the opportunity to meet on generally on an annual basis, or even sometimes a little more often than that, with each of those school boards, with area MLAs that are also represent those particular areas. And we talk at great length about the education sector strategic plan and achieving those benchmarks. And I give you know, the school boards in our area full credit for the effort that they have put into this, and the priority that they have put on achieving these benchmarks and attempting to achieve the benchmarks in you know, all of the parameters that are set out. And even if we need to continue to work towards that, and some of that is some of the funding that is provided, but some of it also is the priority that has been placed on it, not just by the school boards, but by the teachers in the schools as well. Even if we don't achieve each and every criteria that's put forward. And I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm saying we should continually work to go past the criteria that's put forward. But even if we don't, it's still a success.
Yeah.
It really is, because we are better than where we started. And I think that's the important thing when it comes to whatever those targets may be. And we do all sorts of discussions with respect to, budgetary targets is today and things. But in education, even if we do not achieve each and every target that puts forward, it's so important to continually set them and continually prioritize them and strive towards them. And that's what I see that the education sector strategic plan has started to really do, is to put forward those benchmarks and then put a priority on actually achieving them. And I talked to a friend of mine in a high school in my area, a teacher, that has actually moved out, and part of her position was actually tracking some of this. And so it was interesting for me to see it actually in action. It's a couple of years ago now when my daughter was in high school, but it's interesting to see how it is actually going into action, prioritized by the school board, and then our educators actually putting it into action on the ground in the schools.
Well, I see the importance of it too. Like, the 28 school boards have a lot of honorable objectives and roles, but that plan made it a provincial plan where every school division was going to the same ending place. And so it sounds like you will fully support that moving forward.
Absolutely, fully support it moving forward, but always open to where it is. As our challenges change throughout time, so shall our targets, and we should always be aware of that. And that's where communication is so important. Communication, as I said, with our school boards, communication with educators, both officially and unofficially as well, through conversations. I mean, we're all part of a community somewhere, and I have people reach out to me all the time unofficially, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I spent 2 hours at a hockey game this past weekend talking education with a very close friend of mine.
I've heard that's where a lot of things get done, in the hockey rinks and soccer arenas and fun stuff like that. So, okay, we're going to take another prepared question. This one comes from one of our grade 12 students. Jack is his name, and let's see what Jack has to say.
Do you believe that stable and predictable funding to the K-12 education sector could help increase graduation rates and reduce the achievement gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous students? Why or why not?
Yeah, so thanks, Jack. It really is like dealing with graduation rates and narrowing that gap from our Indigenous students to and just narrowing those gaps, I think, is important. So.
Right. No, thank you for the question, Jack, and it's an important question. And again, I revert back to the area that I know as an MLA. We have I do represent 5 First Nations communities, 12 villages, 5 towns, and 17 RMs. So it's a fairly vast place, but we are all geographically connected, and we live next door to one another, whether it's a First Nations community, a village, or a town. And as well, we're connected to the cities that are just outside our constituency as well. So the predictable, stable funding is important as we move forward, and it needs to continue to take into account some of the growth that we're taking. We have a funding formula in place in the province of Saskatchewan. It's been in place for a few years now. It's been consulted on at its inception with the school boards across the province. I think we've updated it once. There's always more work that needs to occur with that, understanding there's differences across the province in some of the rural areas where many of our First Nations communities are, where I live as well. But we do need that predictable and stable funding as we move forward, understanding those differences between our educational institutions. We also need the catch-all, if I dare say, after the fact as well, and that's some of the work that our regional colleges do as well for those that aren't able to graduate on time. As per the, I think it's 19 or 22, I just don't remember. I should know that. I was Minister of Advanced Education for a short period.
But supporting afterwards.
But absolutely, because the goal is to achieve the highest level of education that we attain to, that we strive to as individuals across the province. And my father, and he won't appreciate me saying this, wasn't able to finish his grade 12, but he had 5 children, myself being the oldest. It was probably one of the largest driving factors in his life was that his children actually achieved at least their grade 12, and most of them went on to some type of post-secondary education. It was very, very important to him. Excuse me, and it was something that he didn't have the opportunity to due to circumstances. And the same holds true today for all individuals, including those from First Nations communities. So there has been significant investment in that after the fact through the regional colleges, and I know I point to up in my particular area at Mr. we have the Iron Buffalo Training Center, we have the Darby Morin Center of Excellence at the Big River First Nations, but we need to continue to do that same work and those same measurements in our K-12 system, and understanding that there are students that do move back and forth between the federal and the provincial systems, and we need to ensure that we're able to provide the very best supports that we can, understanding that success is the goal. Tracking and dollars and things of that nature are part of the conversation. Yeah. But to measure, and there's statistics on this many succeed, this many succeed. But the important thing is that Jody succeeds and Bill succeeds and Jamie succeeds. The important thing is the individuals, and we must never forget that.
It's a lot different when you put names behind it rather than just looking at a spreadsheet. And
Absolutely.
So I feel like you to get around the answer, it was stable funding is important.
It is important.
I know I hear that a lot from our teachers and from our we need that stable funding. So.
And I can probably address maybe one of the questions that may come at some point here with respect to funding next year, and that's always a discussion. Is we had a challenging budget this past year, and the government of Saskatchewan, quite honestly, we had to make some very difficult decisions with respect to some of the natural resource royalty rates we had in the province, and we're always concerned about last year and next year, and the unsustainability or the potential of unsustainability of that funding in the short term. I think we need to be aware of that, and our sectors such as education, advanced education included, healthcare and social services need to be the very last place for us to be hunting for those short-term dollars, understanding the long-term impacts that may have. But over the general term, or over the number of years, we need to continue to increase our investment in those very places. Our communities most vulnerable, our healthcare, but just as importantly, or even more importantly, is investing in our next generation's education, which is my kids and yours.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The study that came out, CBC reported, was every dollar invested returns in early years education returns $4 to $6 back later on through the economy.
And never mind the change. It changes lives.
Well, it impacts lives, right? And it's
what's the word? That's priceless.
Yeah, exactly. So I appreciate that. Okay, keep the questions coming. We'll try to get to a few more here. So we're going to go to another prepared question. This is from, actually, it's a grade 2 teacher within our school system. So we're going to hear.
Is it my sister?
No, it's not your sister. It's Jason. Jason's the teacher.
That's not my sister.
And my question is, the Saskatchewan K-12 education sector relies on partnerships. The SSBA, the STF, teacher associations, education sector labor groups, and the provincial government. Do you believe any changes are necessary to this model? Would you do anything to enhance these partnerships?
So those partnerships are important, and that's...
No, they most certainly are. And Jason, I thank you for the question, because partnerships are how our communities are built, and they're how our education sector has been built, and we need to ensure that they're strong as we go forward, whether it be with the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation and their members, whether it be with the Saskatchewan School Boards Association, or even much more local than that with some of, we mentioned there was a question earlier from a lady from the school community council, of which my wife served on as our children were in school, and those are great places for input with respect to education at the very local level, but quite often the challenges that we have in individual locations aren't isolated. They do stretch across. All of them may be different in larger centers versus some rural centers.
Similar,
but there's often very similar patterns. So as we move forward with respect to that relationship and the partnership that we have, or I would have as a government of Saskatchewan member, possibly as a leader of the party and a premier, most assuredly needs to continue, and most assuredly we need to look for every opportunity to strengthen that partnership, because out of good conversations come the problem identification or challenge identification, but so do the solutions. And with every challenge that we run across, there's always a solution, and it's always a better solution when you have everyone in the room. We're very innovative people here in the province of Saskatchewan. I always say if there's a farmer just outside of Saskatoon that can invent a saran wrap dispenser, we can do anything. And the same holds true when it comes to education.
That's what I love about Saskatchewan, is we all, I feel like we are very innovative, and it's
the greatest place on earth.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, we have another question. So thank you, Rick, for sending this question in. So Rick has a question: how will you ensure that early childhood education is accessible?
Well, this actually very much speaks to what we were talking about before, with some of the challenges in those primary grades, and some of the higher needs students that our elementary educators are experiencing relative to a decade or 2 decades ago, or when I attended some 150 years ago, for example. But we have invested heavily in the early years, and we need to continue as we move forward. The accessibility actually leads into a number of different challenges around a few challenges that I've ran into with respect to accessibility on a number of fronts, but early childhood learning is in some of the rural areas, quite honestly, and some areas in our urban Saskatchewan as well, in particular where space begins to become an issue. We're starting to address that, I think, in a substantial way with some of the schools that have been built. But as we move forward, I think a very strong conversation around exactly where these challenges are is necessary, as it leads right into what I'm being told by, again, my sister, but a number of other people that I've talked to as well, with respect to those primary years and how we really need to look at that and have the conversation around that into the future.
So you would look at
absolutely
at the funding and for the yeah
absolutely. We need to address those early years so that our children aren't falling behind later. And
once they get that start early on, it helps throughout all the years, right?
It's contagious.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks for the question. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Rick.
Rick, sorry. Okay, we're going to go to another prepared
Absolutely.
one. This is another education student at the U of R.
Okay.
And Bailey. So Bailey has a question for you, Scott.
And I was just wondering what aspects of the K-12 education program that you're proud of, and what aspects do you find challenging?
So, what aspect of the K-12 system do I find, or am I proud of? There's a number of pieces. The infrastructure investment would be one, but what I'm most proud of, and I've had the opportunity to be in schools that I'm connected with over the last number of years. I was in a school in Spearwood a few weeks ago to their memorial or their Remembrance Day service, which was put on by the students,
cool.
Which is great, and they do it each and every year, and I try to get there as often as I can by the high school students. But what I'm most proud of are the educators that are in those facilities. They go above and beyond what many could expect, and when your children go through and you have the opportunity to talk to them and see that, and I mentioned the provincial community council that we hosted in a community of about 1,500, we hosted 900 kids. I mean, it was
that must have been cool.
Spilling out of the edges. It was fantastic. But when you see teachers going above and beyond and making that type of an effort, both inside and outside the classroom and in the community. That's most certainly what I am most proud of. And I was at an awards ceremony. I'm telling stories here all day, but at an awards ceremony where the community where I live, Shellbrook, recognizes volunteers in the community, and it was one of our teachers that was recognized for just that type of effort, both within the classroom, within the school, but also within the community. And they just, I can't say enough about it. Some of the challenges that I see as we move forward, and the challenge that I see is in those primary years as we move forward, and there's a number of different ways that we are starting to address it. I think the supports for learning are a start to that. There's been over $1 billion invested in supports for learning over the last number of years. That needs to continue into the future, just to ensure that our children have every opportunity in those early years, so they catch that fire, if you will. That was the theme of our conference, catching fire. So they do catch that fire and have every opportunity going into those high school years, and then the sky's the limit after that.
Cool. Well, thanks, Scott. I appreciate that. So we're gonna take a couple more from you right away. Sure. We'll have a couple more, but first, I wanted to do more of a personal touch to get to know Scott Moe a little bit more.
Oh, this could be scary.
So, well, it won't be too bad. So when asking around, I heard I have a few questions we're going to ask, but I heard you like snowmobiles.
I love it.
Yeah, so that's pretty. I remember ours as a kid, and it's nothing fancy, but they sure are fun.
Yeah, they've changed. As a kid, we used to drive them till they broke down, and then you'd fix them all day. And that's changed now.
That's ours. That was ours growing up. Okay, so I have a few questions. We're going to test you. These are going to be tough.
Oh,
so
okay.
If you win them, I do not have a prize, but you'll have bragging rights.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so the first one is going to be tricky. Maybe. So Arcticat founder Edgar Heaton, I don't know how to pronounce it, also founded another brand. So he founded two companies. So he was the co-founder of Arcticat, and he went off and founded another brand.
I know this, and I can't remember. It was Arcticat, and it wasn't Polaris, and it wasn't Skidoo or Bombardier.
Oh, you said it. You said one of them.
It is
one of
Polaris,
those three.
then.
It is Polaris. Oh, okay. I'll give that to him.
Well, I didn't think
he
it
said
was.
it first off. So
Yeah.
Polaris. Yes, I had no idea on that. Okay, question number 2. How many?
Polaris is a much better brand than Arcticat. You might get some hits on the Facebook there now, but Polaris is a far superior product.
I was gonna say, let us know what your favorite brand is. Scott will look at it after. Okay, how many trails, groomed trails, and marked and groomed trails are in North America? 60,000 miles, 225,000 miles, or 1 million miles?
225.
Holy smoke! That's impressive. He hasn't seen these beforehand, so I'm impressed. 225,000 miles of groomed trails.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. Okay, question number 3. And so we have 2 more questions. In 2016, how many registered snowmobiles were there in Canada? 100,000, 400,000, or 600,000?
600,000.
Yeah, holy. This is 3 for 3.
Yeah.
I swear, 600,000 snowmobiles in Canada registered too.
Get like Adam's smartest listener going here.
This will be a new segment we'll start doing. Okay, last one. Snowmobiles, how they're spread out. They float across snow, and they do that because they're light. Pounds per pressure is how it's measured. So right now, a car, if you're driving a car, it's 30 pounds per square inch.
Right.
If you're riding a horse, it's 8 pounds per square inch. Mm-hmm. A person, like ourselves, walking across snow would be 5 pounds per square inch. What pound per square inch do snowmobiles place on fresh snow?
We're 5, it'd be 2 or less.
Take a wild guess. Give me it's within 0.5 or 1 or
0.5.
1. Oh, I'll give that to you. That nice work. It is 0.5.
What is it?
So it's 0.5 pounds per square inch, and that's why snowmobiles glide over it so
Might
well.
be a little more if you goose it and your skis are not on there.
You don't do that, though,
No,
I bet.
no.
No. Keep it
Not on the
calm.
groomed trail.
Fair enough. Okay, so we got another question. And and thanks for playing along.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely. Is this a Skidoo question?
No, this is not a Skidoo question. So this one comes from Wendy. So thanks, Wendy, for the question here. What will you do to ensure that teachers have the resources they need to teach our children? Yeah, that's...
Well, again, this speaks to the long-term investment, and I call it investment, over the years, and we always have a discussion about last year and this year. But as we invest in our children and in our education over the long term, understanding that there's more children in many of our schools these last few years as there was 10, 20, 30 years ago, and I think that's the trajectory. I know in our
10 years out.
Yeah, absolutely. In our plan, this whole leadership campaign is about talking about what are our communities going to look like in the year 2030. A decade or a little better out from right now. So I think it's important that we have the discussion with respect to how we support our school divisions, and in turn how we support our educators that are in the classroom in those schools and part of the school divisions across the province. We've had some very challenging decisions. I don't discount that this past year, and we are. Those continue into the near future, but I think it's important, over the medium to long term, that we really do commit to that conversation on how we do supply or participate in that collaborative conversation on ensuring that we do have the supports that are required by our educators in the school system. I've had some of those discussions at the more local level or the smaller settings, if you will, across the province, but in my constituency as well, with educators on what that is, and we talked about the supports in those primary grades. But this is an important discussion, and it's one that I think we all need to be part of as we move forward through the years.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to rebuild some of those conversations.
Absolutely.
And that's So I'm glad you're open to that.
Oh, for sure.
Okay. Thanks, Winnie, for the question. Yeah. Okay, we have another prepared question here. This comes from Alex. Alex is a grade 9 student at one of the high schools here. So
okay,
let's see what Alex has to say.
My question for you is, what other ideas do you have about helping the K-12 education sector achieve the best results for all Saskatchewan students, including myself?
Well, like I said, all of the difficult questions come from the youth in the province. The adult questions are fairly easy to answer, but with respect to helping supporting our K-12 education sector, and I won't rehash what we talked about with respect to supports in the primary grades, but I think the conversation that we can have will drive us in the right direction when it comes to where we go into the future. I mentioned Tina Beaudry-Miller's comment, our commitment, ideas to bringing in people from the community, wherever that community may be, and bring in some of that local content, again, not just from the business community or the sectors that are operating in the region of the province where you're educated, but also to talk about how our communities are built. And I know in my community, volunteer groups are so very important. We wouldn't have the services we have in the community without the people that have been involved over the years and decades, and now close to a century. Yeah. So we're not just educating children. We're building community members and for communities in our province as we move forward. So we talked a little bit about as we do the supports for our children in those primary grades, but probably one of the most important things that I see as we move forward is that collaborative conversation with all of those involved in educating our children.
Cool. Well, with that conversation piece, you and I may not have all the answers, or some. Yeah. We have some of them maybe, but
you said you had the ones I was missing.
I wish, but I think it's important that we have those conversations, and that we're willing to be vulnerable and have those conversations, and just learn from others, but to take their opinions and
it's the way you get to sometimes there's no perfect direction or no perfect way forward, whatever the topic may be, whether it's in education. But what I have found, and maybe this is the reason we talked about our team a little earlier, that we are so fortunate to have so many team members, is I'm a big believer of getting people in the room and having the conversation about not only what the challenges are, but what the opportunities are to address those challenges, and not just into the months and year ahead, but into the years ahead. And I think that's important, whatever the topic.
Well, I know teachers and school boards will appreciate that. So
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, Elaine, thanks for your question, Elaine, here. So this is coming from the audience. What is your view on inclusive education, and what will you do to reduce barriers to it?
Well, I think our school boards and our leadership, thank you for the question, I guess I would say, first of all, but I give credit to our school boards and our leadership within the schools across the province to doing just this. They are reducing barriers to children and making all children of whatever their thoughts and whatever their choices are, to be welcome in our facilities across the province. And I see that again, most notably at the local level, with some transgender washrooms coming into a community in rural Saskatchewan. That's something that wasn't really a point of discussion when I went to school, like I said, 150 years ago, but what it is today. And so I would take my hat off to not only the school boards, but to the leaders within the schools across the province that are making this a priority, like we talked about with the education sector strategic plan. There's also the assurance that all students are comfortable in their learning environment, and that's how we ultimately provide the best opportunity for success.
Okay, thanks for the question, Elaine. Okay, we're going to go to our last prepared question. This one comes from City of Regina Councillor, City Councillor, Andrew Stevens. We'll see what Andrew has to say here.
If you could do one thing today, and cost was not an issue, to improve the K-12 system, what would it be?
Well, thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that question. If money grew on trees and investment was open to whatever it may be, I think this has came up a number of times. One of the priorities that I see as we move forward is addressing some of the needs in those elementary grades 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in that area, ensuring that the educators in those grades have the supports that they need. Not only for the children that are requiring higher needs, but the entirety of the classroom as well as we move forward. So if money was no object, and it is, but if it wasn't, I think there's opportunities to address that. I think there's opportunities with minimal amounts of money to have a conversation around how we actually do that, and I look forward to that. Started it already at the local levels, but that's somewhere where I see as one of our challenges as we move forward. There's others, no doubt. And I brought 5 or 6 questions for you as well, Adam. So
oh no, I'm not prepared.
Oh, aren't you?
But on your answer that I feel like that was a common theme, and that's something I can tell that I believe that that it's top of mind on your mind. So.
And it's not my idea. It's what's been told to me by multiple conversations that I've had with individuals and groups of individuals. Again, not just in the area that I represent, but in my travels across the province. I've had the opportunity to visit over 100 communities in the last 2.5 months, 3 months, I guess now we've been in the almost in this leadership campaign. And I'd say this, win or lose this leadership race, and I think we're going to win. I'm very biased, but win or lose this leadership race, I'm a winner already. I've had the opportunity to meet so many great people in so many communities across this province that I just feel like a winner at this point.
Scott, I love your ability to joke around, and it's a lot of fun, and I really appreciate your time here talking about education, and I know we'll continue those conversations in the future. So thank you all for tuning in. If you have more comments, keep them coming. We'll try to get some back to Scott, but I really appreciate your time here today.
Thank you so much for doing this. This is a great format to have a serious but also lighter conversation about something that's so important to all of the families in this province.
Oh, it really is. So thanks again. Thanks for coming on. Thanks, everybody.
I want to thank you again for tuning in. And it's important to make your voice heard. One way to do that is to vote. The deadlines are a little different for each party. The Sask Party Leadership Convention is January 27th, 2018 at Prairie Land Park in Saskatoon. However, the deadline to purchase a membership and to be able to vote for your new party leader is December 8th, 2017. And the NDP Leadership Convention is March 3rd, 2018 at the Delta Hotel in Regina. The deadline to purchase a membership is January 19th, 2018. I would like to encourage you to share this post, hashtag it Premier Education, and make sure you click that you like the post as well. I want to further encourage you that if you found this valuable, like the @Adam Hicks Regina School Board page, click on the like button. You can also ensure that you get new notifications coming up. So notifications for new videos, you click on following, you click on see first, and you click on events and all live videos. So next time we have a live video, that'll be the first thing you'll see is when we're tuning in with a new candidate. Thanks a lot. Take care. The Premier Education Campaign is created by Adam Hicks, Trustee of the Regina Board of Education. The opinions expressed in this project do not necessarily reflect those of the Board of Education or Regina Public Schools.